Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. My name is Dan Murphy, and with me always is Derek Brissett and Stu Hardy. Gentlemen, we actually have Jeff Hassler with us once again. You know, we had a fantastic time interviewing and talking about his career, and we thought, you know what, let's keep the party going and let's kind of talk about some current rugby that's going on right now. MLR is creeping towards that start date, and we've had some big announcements happen. So let's get right into it, guys. The big one is kind of big for the league. The Dallas Jackals will be delaying their inaugural season to 2022. I want to talk first, guys, and Derek, maybe I'll have you kind of talk about what are some of the reasons for this happening, because you know the training camps are supposed to be happening in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely the announcement comes at kind of a shocking time. I think a shock to a handful of a lot of the players and stuff too. Like they said, camp's supposed to start in about 2 weeks. I think the announcement came about 5 days after the Jackals put season ticket deposits on sales as well. So there's fans that probably bought season ticket deposits within the 5 days leading up to them saying that they're going to postpone the inaugural season. The announcement, I guess the press release, kind of vague in my opinion. They just kind of were like, COVID's been crazy and has hurt a lot of
COVID be crazy.
Yeah, exactly. COVID's being blamed for everything. Anything bad that happens this year, you can just blame COVID and people. That's the automatic excuse you can go with now, I think. But I mean, it's probably like part of it, I would imagine, is genuinely part of the reason why. But it's but like the overall was kind of vague, and I think right now, like, you just kind of gotta feel bad for like the players and stuff that may have been planning on relocating to Dallas, or are already in the process of doing that, or like guys that, like you said, 2 weeks out of camp and now they don't have a team to play for. And I mean, Jeff, like, I'm not a player, but Jeff, I'm not sure how if you've talked to any of the guys on Dallas or anything, but like, how do you think a lot of these guys are feeling, kind of knowing that we're about a month away from the season starting? These guys have to now they have to go into a dispersal draft for the 9 Raptors that are on the team. That's going to be their second dispersal draft in just when did they do the first one? Like just before the inaugural. Yeah, so it's like second dispersal draft within a calendar year, basically. So like, how do you think like those guys are kind of feeling going in, or now that sort of their 2021 is a little up in the air?
Yeah, I mean, like personally, from a player in that league, there was a lot of chat instantly from the AG's guys too. And like, I don't know many of those players personally, but being in the league and knowing what that means, like, as much as it's like a spectator sport and people are looking at it kind of in like a macro overview, you got to think of players, this is their livelihood. And they're in a COVID scenario where people haven't had salaries coming in, those sorts of things. So for those players, we were instantly on it, like, as a player group, and then some of the leadership guys within the MLR too, just saying like these guys are in a very, very tough position, and you got to kind of think about it as they're expected to be in a city and playing in a league and making money, and all of a sudden that gets stripped from them. And it's player well-being, and just like knowing that people have to make ends meet. And with this happening, there's genuine concerns from players across the league, what it's going to look like, how it's going to affect the league, new scheduling and that sort of stuff. So interesting that a lot of the guys that don't even know those players from Dallas are very concerned about it. So
Stu, I got a question for you about this. And is this something that's going to benefit Major League Rugby in the long run? Does delaying the season to next year, kind of helping them get all their ducks in a row, strengthen the league, or does this just become another kind of kink in the armor? Major League Rugby hasn't had the best business situation the past year between Colorado leaving and the whole mess with Kanaloa Rugby. Can't really blame that on MLR, but is this something that's going to strengthen the league, or is it something that could be seen as a weakness in a developing league?
I think at the immediate moment, it's a bad image for the league as a whole to have a big new team pulling out, and it is because of the vagueness of everything within the press release. You can't be able to like pin it. If they were able to pin it down and say, because of COVID, there's been a backlog with visas, for example. Their head coach is Alan Clark, is Irish. Their attack coach is Scottish, and we've been aware that there have been visa issues with MLR in the past, and to now say that, oh, COVID has just made everything take much longer, that even if as soon as Alan Clark was announced as the head coach, he started his visa process and it's still taking so long. As somebody who's currently applying for permanent residency in Canada, it's affecting everyone of how long a visa process and residency process is taking. But in the long run, for example, we're now going back to even conferences on both sides. I know the schedule probably won't be changed too much, but it may allow a bit of benefit. It's still going to be an 18-week season, still going to get those 2 bye weeks.
Are we though? Do we know that for sure?
No, but
Jeff, do you guys know what's going on?
So I'm looking at it now, and just seeing like the current kind of COVID environment. I think for me, and speaking to some of the other players, it's interesting knowing that we're going to even teams in both conferences, and then you look at the fixtures where we would play Dallas. Are those going to be bye weeks? Are we going to condense the schedule? Or, in my opinion, it would be a good thing to leave those weeks open, because I think there are going to be the reality of COVID. There's going to be
rescheduling of games.
So leave those weeks open that the teams would have to play. Don't do it as a bye week, but almost a rescheduling week. And those sorts of things haven't come out to players, or even within the inner workings of MLR. So it's interesting to see how that is going to work. I guess we just got to wait and see, right?
How would you, if that is the way that like you would like to see it go, like how would you kind of balance the fact that like teams play Dallas like an uneven number of times, right? Like there's some teams that don't play Dallas at all. There's teams that were scheduled to play Dallas once, and then there's teams that are scheduled to play Dallas twice. So like how would you kind of like, would you do like, I guess like say maybe what the NHL did to the end of their season last year, where they were just like everyone played a weird number of games. The standings are going to be based on like percentage of wins instead, or like how would you, or something else entirely, like how would you kind of handle that if your idea is to just not like have bye weeks instead of playing a game with fewer scheduled against Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. And I've spoke to some of the guys at Seawolves as well, and that's just kind of the reality of it. You might have teams that just get that extra week, but we've also spoke about just having it like a true conference style. So let's kind of take away those away games to the Eastern conferences in my position, and just run a straight up Western conference now that we're even teams, and then do like top 4 or even top 6 with like NFL style, where you got like the top team gets the bye, and don't even do the crossovers to the other side. And that's a whole different conversation. But you're right, because it's like we have a home and away with Dallas, and the teams that don't, I think there's probably 2 teams that don't even play them. I think.
Yeah. There's everybody in the league would miss out on playing 2 teams, and then the East was all strange.
Yeah.
They had the uneven numbers, or like or like one less team than the Western Conference. So there's some Eastern Conference teams had to play each other 3 times, and then there was So it's I guess realistically the entire schedule kind of has to be redone, and like with the season about just under 2 months away now. And training camp starting in 2 weeks.
They come out already and said they're going to redo it. So I don't know if it's going to be like I said, conference wise, or how they're going to deal with those kind of weeks that were scheduled in against Dallas. But the whole thing it's being looked at by all the different ownership and stuff. So it will be interesting to see. But again, because of COVID and the way it is, and you look at other national sports leagues and stuff, in my opinion, it would be beneficial to leave those weeks open to make games up, because I think the reality of where we're at, there's going to be cancellation. It's just it's inevitable that we're not in a bubble situation. We're not able to really stop some of the family members and stuff that are working in those communities, bringing COVID in, and yeah, it's tough. It's super tough.
Like, what do you kind of think like is going to be like the solution, I guess, to where all the Dallas players go, like as players in the league? Like, so I know like our last episode, you guys were kind of talking about, you were talking about like a Canadian rugby players association and stuff. That Major League Rugby obviously doesn't have a players union or anything, but like how are you guys kind of reacting to, like, are you as the players, like, are you happy seeing a team that's kind of like, hey, like all these guys thought they had a job in Dallas and then now they're potentially, like, no one said what the rules of the dispersal draft are, so we have no idea, but like potentially saying going to any of the other 12 cities in the league now?
Well, so that was like one of the main things, and our group chat blew up as soon as that article came out. And you got to think of player welfare and stuff, and you look at MLR salaries and the salary caps. Most teams they're locked up, right? Like, you're working within pretty constrained budgets straight off the bat, and they're good players that are at Dallas, right? So there are teams that will benefit from those guys coming, but then also, what's the league going to do to make sure that are they going to increase the salary cap? Are they going to let these guys get paid the salaries that they're supposed to have? How do we navigate those sorts of things so that those players can do a dispersal and still be involved in the league in some capacity, right?
I wonder if they'll do something similar to like how some, like in the NHL, you can part of the salary can still be part of another team. So I wonder if they'll just say if you're a Dallas Jackals player, your money does not go towards your team's cap.
Yeah.
So that might be something interesting that they might have to look at, especially with, like you're saying, the teams being so close and it being, if this had been like December, they announced that they were leaving, maybe teams might have a little bit more leeway in terms of cap. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that's tough. Like, each program's going to have to either have salary cap increases, and then that comes down to the individual owners and staffing. Are we willing to fork out a bit more cash? We're in like the early stages of MLR where salary caps have been pretty locked in to what they are. Some teams are like, let's push it up. Some teams just can't actually do that. So as much as they'd like to take in those players, you got to understand that some of these guys the owners aren't able to actually do that. So then again, that creates the question, like, some of these guys are definitely at loose ends. So it's super, super tough.
Well, guys, there's been some more news in MLR, and we're going to go to Utah now. And Utah announced the resignation of head coach Chris Latham. Latham joined the Warriors in 2019, and was helping build kind of a culture within Utah. So him leaving was quite a shock in the Major League Rugby sphere, and he cited personal reasons, and there have been tons of guesses out there about why he left, but they are currently now going to be coached by Sean Pittman, who was their assistant coach, came in the same time as 2019. Now, guys, they have, between Pittman, they still have Brandon Sparks, who's their director of rugby. They're in kind of a unique situation, especially since Utah did have a lot of turnover. How do we feel about this situation with the head coach leaving so quickly before the season starts and stuff? Pittman has now had a lot of experience. I mean, he worked with the Seawolves, he worked with USA Rugby, and so he's also worked with Utah. So they seem to be an okay situation, but it's just an interesting thing to once again happen so soon, close to the start of the season.
Yeah. It's it is kind of weird. I guess it kind of got maybe, I guess, overshadowed by the Dallas stuff that came out later in that week, though. But yeah, it's I guess part of that would just be, like you said, it's like same thing with Dallas. I guess training camp starts in 2 weeks, to go through a coaching change right before the season starts. Like, there could have been like conversations between Brandon Sparks and Chris Latham about like the type of players and stuff to bring in. And now, Sean Pittman, obviously being the assistant coach, is probably not, the philosophy probably isn't that different, but But you still kind of have to go through a big, I guess, structural kind of change, or a really big key piece of your team leaving just 2 weeks before camp starts. And it's not, obviously, it's kind of not, I guess, not as anywhere near as crazy as Dallas. But I mean, like, that's got to be, I would imagine, kind of an interesting situation for players to be in, kind of going, 2 weeks out of camp, and you now have a different guy as your head coach. And I guess the rest of the coaching staff would have to be reshuffled a little bit, as you now need someone to kind of fill what Pittman's role used to be too. So there's been a lot of dramatic changes in MLR over the past week so far. So but yeah, like you said, though, it's like Utah. I thought Utah did a really good job of like adding some different key pieces and stuff. And they added Fraser Hurst from UBC. So now that was the last official team that didn't have a Canadian on it. So they added that, and now Canadians have invaded all 12 teams officially in Major League Rugby now. So kind of excited to see that. That'll be interesting too, because with Hurst too, like the only other scrum half they have signed right now is Michael Baska. So that's going to be you would imagine that's going to be a lot of opportunity for Hurst to get a lot of playing time, even if it is 21 in jersey instead of the starting 9. But yeah, I'm curious to kind of see how it kind of shapes out. I mean, I think Pittman's going to be a good coach for them. So I'm still looking forward to what the Warriors are going to offer this year. So I guess I'll turn it kind of over to Jeff. It's like, what do you think of like the squad that they have built so far, and how big do you think like the coaching change so soon to the start of the season would affect the players?
Yeah, I think putting Pittman in place is, to me as a player, it makes sense. He's been in that system. The players know him, so it's not like yes, it's a big change. Having a new head coach, but he knows what's going on within the workings of that program. So as a player, that's something that you can look at and be comfortable with. And I think MLR as a whole, like, there's tons of chopping and changing, and it's dynamic and it's moving very quickly and stuff. So players are pretty used to changes happening on the hot and ready, right? So I think they've done the right thing putting someone in place. And I'll say too, he's an American guy, so you get lots of foreigners coming in and stuff. So having someone that's kind of homegrown, that also is just helps the league and that brand as well. So I think overall it's a good thing for them.
Do you think that like teams should kind of be, because obviously Major League Rugby, we always kind of talk about how great it is for developing North American players, now that a lot of guys have somewhere to play full time, but the league can also be kind of used to obviously be developing North American coaches, as well as even more North American referees and all other kind of aspects of rugby. And it's like, do you think like the league should kind of be striving towards maybe having a few more North American based coaches or North American born coaches and stuff in the league? Or like, do you think like kind of bringing in like those guys that kind of grew up, or say like in New Zealand or Australia or somewhere in Europe or whatever, bringing in that expertise obviously also kind of has that benefit? Or is it just more of finding that like balance throughout the whole league?
Yeah, I think it's got to be a blend. I think because rugby's not it's not like a super prominent sport as of yet. MLR is changing that, and trying to build that. But the amount of expertise and knowledge that those guys do bring over is super beneficial. And having someone like Pittman in an assistant coaching position and learning from other people allows him to move into this position with a bit more of a knowledge base. And I mean, I've been coached by foreign coaches pretty much my whole career, and they have that level of expertise and knowledge of growing up around that game and stuff, and having that spill into the North American coaching culture is good. But again, there's so much benefit to having a local kind of homegrown guy to be able to take over that and to learn from those guys. So I think it is a blend of having the guys that know firsthand what it takes to be a successful pro league, and then learning from those guys.
So the last bit of Major League Rugby news is this. Again, another quick departure before the season started. Um, the Seattle Seawolves founder and president Shane Skinner has decided to step down. He remains with the club still as an owner, but is kind of stay in the background of the business and of the team. Jeff, you were a part of the Seawolves for almost a full season. Did you ever really have any experiences with Shane and kind of how he helped run the team?
Yeah, obviously, being an owner in the MLR, it's taxing. You have to put, I think, more than owners know. You got to put a lot of time into it. It's not like you can just be kind of a silent partner within it. You gotta be on the ground and working day to day. Personally, I really enjoyed Shane, and I got to know him pretty well. It's just, again, it is a taxing thing. And I think over the last 3 years, and I don't want to like put words in his mouth or anything, but for him, I imagine there was just a lot more to have to deal with than he anticipated. And for him to make that decision, I spoke to some of the guys, and interesting transition. But for him, I think it was just more of a personal decision, and how much he had to actually put into to make that stuff kind of to happen. And he's done a great job with the branding and that sort of stuff. But he wants to stay involved, and he loves the team, he loves the players and that sort of thing. But you're not just an owner, you're a GM. You have to operate a full program. Like there's a lot that you got to consider, right? So yeah, for him, I don't know the exact reasons that he's made that decision, but I can see the amount of stress, and with COVID and so many different kind of circumstances, why he made that decision.
We're going to move a little closer to home because the Arrows have announced their branding of their joint academy with the Ontario Blues, the Ontario Blues Junior Arrows Academy, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but they released some fantastic graphics along with their academy mandates. And Corey Hector added, the logo, while symbolic in nature, further demonstrates our ongoing partnership and commitment to player development. While our rugby sessions have been temporarily disrupted, Ontario is currently in the tail ends of a lockdown, so anything rugby related, especially with the younger athletes, have been very much disrupted. The players and coaches have continued to demonstrate our shared values, and the momentum we build through the end of 2020 leaves us well positioned to hit the ground running in 2021. Now, I want to get kind of two different views. And Stu, from a fan perspective, what does it feel like to have the attention to detail that they put into it kind of show? Because it'd be easy just to slap, the Arrows logo and then put a little JR next to it. But they obviously put a little bit of thought into, showing that they're how this logo is going to evolve and how they really want to put the time and effort into their junior team or academy.
Yeah, it is the little details that come through and make it more than the sum of its parts. I find, like, they have a video on their Arrows Instagram account showing the creation of this new logo and how it's formulated as a combination of the Arrows and Ontario Blues logo to come together. Even on the Arrows website, they have the Junior Academy brand story, which is talking about progression and moving forward, and that when we win as one. When we lose, we lift each other up. And because if you were to break down everything into like the simple basics terms, we can just describe rugby as running whilst passing backwards and tackling. But it's obviously more than just that. It's the little details that come together. It's like the psychology of everything, where it's going to go. And even with this junior academy, which is aimed at, I believe, 13 to 17-year-olds, they still include the Arrows player pathway, which is looking at going from the junior academy into the senior academy, or working with the Rugby Canada under 18 and under 20s program. And it just builds more that the Arrows are more than just, a team that will be playing in the MLR every weekend or every other weekend, depending on bye weeks. It's showing that this is a pathway for players that are now kids, or like 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, that they can say, I've seen Canada play in like the Rugby World Cup, and I want to go to France. I want to go to wherever the next World Cup is being hosted after that, and I want to play for Canada. How do I do it? And now seems to be a clearer way for that to happen. And it starts with something as simple as just putting more emphasis into a logo and showing the story behind it.
Yeah. Now, it's also, honestly, it's just a really cool logo. I mean, like taking away like some of the deeper analysis that's there. I dig the idea of taking like the Rugby Ontario, like the kind of like, which is already kind of cool, the trillium with like the rugby ball shape, which I already kind of like, and then adding a bunch of the making it a little bit more like arrowhead kind of shape to it. Mm-hmm. I think it's a nice little combination of the two programs kind of merging together. And yeah, as you said, it's like, I mean, what we kind of talked about a little bit with Jeff last week too, is it's, the path is sometimes kind of, or it used to be, it's a little bit wild. It's kind of like whatever sort of avenue you can find to, elevate yourself to get to that program, to get to the pro game. And then, maybe there's, a little bit of the right people watching you play in the right game at the right time kind of mixed in there. But like I said, like, it's nice to see like the Arrows, especially at the very least in Ontario and Canada as a whole, like developing that, like, if you have those aspirations to go pro in rugby, it's like you can, like, Dan, your favorite comparison that you love is like the hockey one of like the ladder is incredibly clear. Like you go, you play AAA, then you play junior, then you play in the AHL, then you play in the NHL. It's nice and very clearly laid out for you. It's nice to see like rugby kind of looks like they're developing that. And it's nice to like, now there's like a little bit of a logo and a little bit of an identity behind what the Arrows are building here.
Yeah. And then, Jeff, I want to kind of ask you about that, because in the last 5 years, we've had the Pacific Pride be, reignited. Although it's not an official youth sport tournament, the Canada University men's tournament has kind of been reignited as well. And then, you add not only just the Arrows Academy, but all these different MLR academies are popping up. As someone who unfortunately did not have those luxuries, Jardine is starting his career, does it make you optimistic towards the future of Canadian rugby to see all these different, spots opening up and opportunities opening up for younger players?
Yeah, and I think Stu, you made a super good point. It's you're making with this Ontario Blues Academy. It's like as a young athlete coming through, it's a tangible thing that you can see, and you can see the pathway that you need to go. So for me personally, playing football first, I was lucky that I got into that U17 program, but then there were 2 or 3 years in between U17 and U20 where I was off the radar completely. And it was actually Mike Shelley that came in and pulled me back in from Saskatchewan to play. But you didn't have an idea of exactly what it took to make it to the national team. Whereas now I think having the MLR and having so many players playing in it and having the Toronto Arrows there, you go, okay, as a young guy, you can watch that and say, okay, we have a professional team. So that's something I want to aspire to get into. And then having this Ontario Blues Academy, that's the system you got to get into so that you can make that transition and make that jump. So having a clear pathway, even as a young athlete, you didn't know exactly what you needed to do. Like, how do you get yourself into that system? Whereas now you can identify it. And if it's something that you're really serious about as a 14-year-old kid, you can kind of target that and have that streamlined kind of pathway to make yourself into the MLR team, and then obviously into the Canada system. Toronto Arrows are they're developing players for our national team, and that is the purpose behind it. Get guys in that environment early, and then having the Ontario Blues Academy is just a way that players can be solid in knowing that they have that.
How important do you think it is, just like across the board, for all the MLR teams to start setting up something like an academy system? Because not every team does have it at this point, but it seems to be kind of, especially, some of them are kind of crazy too, like the Free Jacks having the 13 teams regionally wide, which seems like a massive undertaking for that club. But if it works out for them, that'll be great. But like, what's kind of like your stance on, like, do you think, like, is this where like a lot of teams energy and stuff, like obviously away from the MLR team itself, but like, do you think that like building academies is like, kind of like, I guess, the way of the future to kind of continue to build the sport in North America?
It has to be. We're in North America and Canada, especially, again, there wasn't that pathway. So going back to the last episode, we're talking about Exeter, how they've been so successful. They have one of the best academies in all of the Premiership. These guys, they're identified at a very young age, and they do a lot to retain those players to go into the top level. And you're seeing a really great brand of rugby that these guys have been involved in from 14 years old. So if we can do that same sort of thing, and go to, say, Uruguay, like those guys, no one knew anything about them on a national stage until 3 years ago. That happened 8 years ago when they started bringing those guys into that environment where they're training all the time. They're not in full professional environments, but they're centralized and they're running systems, and there's cohesion within the team. So we need to get those sorts of things, because even from when I first started in 2011, or 2012, after the 2011 World Cup, we were 11th in the world, and now we're 24th. And we don't have those pathways. We're losing games to Georgia and Romania, and they have those programs, and they have the systems for those players to be identified at a very young age and to scale them up. So having this in place, it gets the guys that are serious about rugby from a young age. It's not so much rugby is a secondary sport anymore. We're at the point now where people are learning the game at a young age, and we have to put those things in place so that they have the opportunity to move up and to scale up. And now you can see it as a tangible, I need to do this, and that's how I'm going to get this pathway.
We're going to finish off, guys, talking about rugby kind of as a broader scheme. One of the former Bulls directors of rugby, Alan Zondag, decided to go to LinkedIn to write this article. But he wrote a doozy of an article talking about how rugby's, and this is the title, rugby's current state must be a major concern for most rugby intellectuals. Now, I don't describe myself as a rugby intellectual, mostly because I don't have the time to watch every single league and game, but I feel very strange reading this, and I just don't agree with it. And so I want to get your guys' opinion about it. Some of the things he says is it's becoming slow, pedantic, predictable, and boring. It's feeble to watch, too many stoppages. And one that really I take issue with is different playing styles have disappeared. There's only copy and paste rugby, all doing the same thing over and over. One team just does it better than the others. So guys, you've all had a chance to look at this. How do we feel about what he's trying to say? Not everyone in the world has been able to play rugby, right? The U.S. national team Canada hasn't been able to. Teams like Uruguay have played a little bit in South America and had like a quick tour. But what do we feel about this? Like it's such a strange thing to come out.
Honestly, I say we start with Jeff on this, because I'm very curious to hear a player's perspective on the article that Alan Zonda presented here.
Yeah, I had a quick glance over some of the things he put, and like there's multiple points on there. And from a player's perspective, there are things that I can certainly relate to. Um, it's I'll take Tyler Ardron, for example, just to contextualize Rugby Canada. So in the Osprey system, in Welsh Rugby, it was very much about possession and controlling the game. You're playing in wetter conditions and that sort of thing. And then him moving to New Zealand and playing in the Chiefs environment and speaking to him, he's like, my rugby IQ has gone up massively. And they give them the freedom to play a little bit more and offload and use the skills that he had. That I wouldn't say they stunted him in the UK, but his abilities weren't able to be expressed. So with the comments of being a slow, pedantic, predictable, boring, in the international sense, you see teams capitalizing on big mistakes, and having turnover ball, and that's when the All Blacks will score. So you have to play within kind of a structured system, and it could be perceived as slow and pedantic. But then you watch some of the other like Premiership games and Super Rugby and stuff when the guys aren't in that massive international high pressure situation, and you see massive amounts of skill. Like it's rugby is, yes, it's getting bigger, faster, stronger, but you're seeing stuff that hasn't ever been done before. So I don't agree with all of the things that he's saying, but there's more emphasis on stats and possession and the turnover game and that sort of thing. They make sense when you actually strip it down, but yeah, it's tough. Like he's made some seriously aggressive comments in there, and like senseless kicking and stuff. It's like, I get that. Like I don't want to kick. I want to keep the ball and play free flowing rugby and stuff. But at the end of the day, it is a territory and possession based game. So all of those things kind of tie into it. Yeah, it is interesting.
See, the one thing I kind of get, and I know, I guess his overall thing is like there's certain elements that teams will play certain styles that are kind of boring. And based on what we kind of talked about in the last episode, and with you saying like how excited you were, not even to necessarily like win the Shield with Seattle, but just like the week leading up to it, how excited you were to actually like you get to play in a final for the first time, as you said, in any sport that or at any level. And kind of like looking at it, it's like he is mentioning that, maybe at some time, maybe some teams' play styles can be a little boring or something. But at the same time, it's like some of those teams that have maybe those boring play styles are, teams that win. Right. So it's like when it comes back, and he even says it's like some of the stats kind of back up that some of these styles are successful from like so it's like, I guess, Jeff, like, would you as a player, like, would you rather play on a boring team that won a championship or the most exciting team in the world, but you're like last in the league? Like, what's better from
basically? Would you rather play with like a team like Fiji that is just out there to they just cause chaos? They are chaos incarnate. Or would you rather play for a team that he's native from, South Africa, that won the last World Cup playing this style of rugby that he's complaining about?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a super interesting question, and I'll answer it in a quick second. But you make a good point. Like knowing that he was in the Blue Bulls kind of coaching environment, and knowing what South African rugby is, they won a World Cup based off their pack, having a strong pack, possession, and a kick-based game, and controlling the game. They've won it, so it's like it's tough to see some of his points where that is exactly what they base their structure around, and they won it. They're the best team in the world. Me personally, I think rugby is, and I enjoy it the most when people are having fun. And I've got 2 left feet. I'm not a kicking guy. You know what I mean? So like, I'll carry it from my own 22 when I get the ball. Like I just want to play. And then my personal experience. So when I was at Ospreys playing with some of those guys that are the best in the world, I played with Dan Bigger quite a bit, and he is the classic 10 that controls the game, and that's why he's being in that position leading that team. But I personally enjoyed playing with Sam Davies way more because he would take it to the line. He offloaded. He wanted to play. And so anytime he was slotted in that 10 position as a wing where they give you the ability to free roam and that sort of stuff, that's when I really enjoyed it. And like, I think everybody just wants to have fun playing. Like that's what it comes down to. You've done it since you were a young kid. And I switched sports because of the enjoyment of the game. And being in those games where you're kind of just plugging away and possession and this and that, it's not as fun as when you're playing running rugby, and that it happens. And certain players are better at doing it, or that's the way their playing style is. So, it depends on the level that you're playing in and the certain situations of the game. Really, kind of a vague answer, but yeah.
No, I get it. Stu, how do you feel about this? Because I like it when you get fired up about some of this stuff. So how do you feel about this article?
And Stu's the one that sent us all of this, so I could immediately tell. Whenever Stu sends a link to something, it's because he's mad. It's not. Stu never sends a link and is like, "Hey guys, check out this really cool try that someone just scored." It's always like, "I hate what this person just said." So,
well, funny you should mention that. I think the first thing that's kind of a bit of a red flag for me is that even in the title of the article, he says it's a concern for most rugby intellectuals. He's not saying it's a concern for rugby fans. It's not a concern for the coaching structure. It's not even a concern for the players. It's just the intellectuals. And this kind of goes back to talking about the old guard. Because Alan Zong, he's a very decorated coach. He's been involved in South African rugby for a good few decades, and has moved from coaching in the amateur era into the professional era. So I'm not pushing him aside, but it does seem an expression that the old guard uses of amateur was so much better than these namby-pamby professionals that have to be pampered everywhere they go. And I know that just rubbed me wrong. There's also a few points in the article that seem to contradict him. So he's talking about, let me find the exact wording, is when it comes to
the exact one point that really irked you.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's the only reason we're talking about this is because Stu is incredibly upset by this man's article. So we have to do it, or else Stu will just keep yelling at me and Dan. So we'll let him yell at the masses of people that will listen to this now instead.
But they're talking about that's the thing. There's a lot of points in this article, and then when it comes to the conclusion, he continues keeping it vague. And so it's how can we change this? Or coaches and players must change their attitude to playing. Not specific. Okay. What's the next point? It contains a different facet. They must all be used at the right. Not specific. The laws can still be tweaked. The laws are always being tweaked. And then it's the only thing that's concrete is that penalize the players that are infringing. Stop warning them. If you have transgressed the laws, you must be penalized. And that I can see both sides of it, because I've seen referees give certain players warnings when it's clearly a penalty offense. But at the same time, is that if you make everything, any mistake that happens or any action immediately becomes a penalty, then he's just making a worse game, because then he's complaining about it being a stop-start game. And if you penalize everything, that's a stop-start game. That's just making it worse. He then also goes, I will put forward some of my recommendations in the next few weeks. It's great, now I have to do more reading. Because I think if you identify a problem, you have to have a solution of how
immediately
to rectify.
It's clickbait, and really that's what it comes down to. I get frustrated when he talks about things like there's too many substitutes. Before we know it, there will be 15 players sitting on the bench in the future. This is not good for the game. Obviously he's not worried about player welfare then. There just seems to be certain things that too many people allowed on the field during matches, medical staff, water boys, etc. This is very disruptive and should not be allowed. Okay, so if a guy gets hurt, then we have to leave him, or the guys can't have water. There's just these weird comments that he makes that just seem very strange to me. And I'm not right. I'm going to say I'm not a rugby intellectual. I'm not going to declare myself that part of that upper echelon of rugby people. But I just seen that. I personally think post and Jeff, I think this would be interesting to get your perspective on this. I think post pandemic, when everyone starts getting back into the real swing of things, I think we're going to see a big change in how people take running their programs and how rugby is just going to be played, because you've seen it across a lot of different sports, how they're starting to run their business, their programs based on how COVID has interrupted it. There's a lot more. I think there's going to be a turn a lot more into player welfare. At least I hope there will be after all of this. So I think it's going to be interesting. So maybe he'll get what he wishes, and there might be a change. I just think that he's just saying the sky is falling when there really isn't any sign for it.
Yeah, I've actually now found the contradiction. So one bullet point says a lot of senseless kicking. The attitude is that as long as I don't have the ball or I'm not in my half of the field, I will have a better chance to win the match. And then a few bullet points later is that teams are playing uneconomical rugby, putting in so much effort for minimum results, just going through the motions. They are happy as long as they are keeping possession.
So they keep possession, but they're also kicking it away.
Yeah. So are they making stupid kicks, or are they keeping possession? It's this is, and that's the thing, is that if there's contradictions, there's no solution to these apparent issues, and it's not aimed at, like, if he had opened the article with saying that, rugby has become so boring, fans aren't watching anymore, and then lists like the issue or like the possible causes of that, I think that it would be a better structured article. But this just seems to be a coach that's listing his grievances and then wants us all to, follow his blog until he can produce the what he believes are the right answers. The other thing is that anything when it comes to changing the laws of some games, I know that the TMO is always a big thing in the European leagues and international games. And it's like, why does the TMO have so much control in these games when shouldn't he only be allowed to do, the grounding of a try, or if there's been like a penalty offense, and that's it. And it actually reminded me is that 10 years ago, during the Six Nations, was the Wales-Ireland game where Wales took a quick line out, scored the try, and the referee had to give the try, even though the ball that was used was a brand new ball, and therefore they had to do a full line out. They couldn't do a quick throw in. And it's because of things like that we have the rules in place for when it comes to TMO, is that they have to, because they'll see things that, the line judge and the referee can't see everything that's going on. And obviously having an extra pair of eyes will help, definitely. But when it comes to what this guy wants to do, he obviously wants to change the laws to make it like a more interesting game and only have so many players playing, and they can either kick sensibly or not have possession. I'm still not sure what they wants to do with that, but you have to ask, why do we have the current laws in place? And yes, the laws will change. They'll have to. It's a growing game. Players ever since the game turned professional, the laws have been changing. But I think before any changes can be made, you have to look at why we have the current law structure available to us at the moment.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off that because I want to ask Jeff a question here. And just as a player, since we are on this topic, if you could change one law, which one would you change? And what would you change it to? Or if you could add a law, go with that. If you can either add one law or change one law to something else, what would you pick?
So I think the bullet points, I can read through them, and every single one of them instantly I think of something. So I could go through each individual one. But there is one rule that's been brought up already that I think there are some leagues that want to trial it, and I think it would get rid of what he's saying, too many stoppages, slow, pedantic, whatever. And it's It's the rule that they're saying if you kick it from in your 22 and it hits ground and goes out, you regain possession. So
Right, the rugby league 40-20 kick rule.
exactly. So that one for me, especially as a back three player, is interesting because if you're out of position and that ball hits ground and goes out, they gain possession wherever it goes out, right? So it puts a lot of emphasis on having a proper backfield, and within that, that means you're not going to be able to do what current pro teams do, where they'll put a 10 and a 15, your top kickers in the backfield, and then wingers can play up front, and you've got a 13-man line. You're going to have to put 3 players in the backfield to cover the ground. So that is going to open up rugby a little bit more, and players can attack from all areas of the field.
Right.
So that one to me is interesting, and I'd like to see it, because that, even having one player in the backfield, having 15 players on the pitch, that changes things massively, because you have way more ability to attack seams. Your defensive line is spread a little bit more because you have to cover that. You can have a 60-meter swing with a good kick. And with the skill of the 10s and 9s nowadays, they can put that ball exactly where it needs to be to get that 60-meter swing. So you have to load the backfield a little bit more, which opens up the game and makes it a bit more expansive, and you would see a little bit more free-flowing rugby. So that's something that when I heard that initially, I was like, ooh, that's kind of a spicy one.
Do you think that would be like, that would kind of open up the game more, just because of like even if, I guess if it would be something new, maybe teams would have to work on being able to like execute it and everything, but it would just be kind of like the threat that a team with, say, like a really good kicker would be able to be like, yeah, here, I'll take this 50 meters right now because your winger is 3 feet away from where he should be.
Yeah. And the skill level, so that's why I don't agree with this. He says one of the points is, I don't know exactly which one. Yeah, a lot of senseless kicking. It's like, okay, well, right now you're doing it for possession, but it wouldn't be senseless kicking. Some of those guys have such a good skill level that when you are 3 meters out of position, that is the difference between turning your head and catching that ball or them getting 60 meters. Like right. those guys are so good that they can put it in that spot if you're right. a bit of a position. So you'd have to drop extra players. And then you see some teams that are dropping 8 men on box kicks so they can just get full steam ahead. You're going to have to drop a forward into the backfield too. And then with that, again, it spreads your defensive line across the pitch, and it opens those little half gaps. And you're going to see the games progressing with forwards that aren't just guys that sit there and stick their heads in rucks. Like they're like super, super solid ball carriers. And you give them that extra meter with one other defender, honestly, it changes it like massively. You look at like a yellow card and a red card, how much more space do players have
when there's one less guy on the pitch?
100%. So you put that guy in the backfield, he's got to cover it, because that is a massive advantage. If you can get that gain from a kick, that creates more space in the entire game.
Well, even adding on to that, then, like with you're saying, like how much more space you have with a red card and yellow card, then I guess if you had that rule in place where you get rewarded for having that precise kick, and then now you give up a yellow card and stuff, and now you have like another less guy on like the defensive line because you need to drop somebody else back to that backfield in order to cover that kick. And now, like, I guess in a way that would just open up even more, and you'd probably get more tries at the very least with yellow cards, more points like during that phase of the game too. Then
100%. And like for me, positionally thinking as a wing, in the yellow card scenario, there are certain positions where I'm way more conscious. I'm like, if that guy's out of the game, I'm up shit creek basically, right? Mm-hmm. And then it depends too, like on if you have 2 centers that one of them doesn't reload to my side, with 2 passes, you're automatically in a scenario where you've got to give space, and they're gonna exploit that. So if you guys don't have if you don't have someone that's reloading back to your side, and then you're in a yellow card and you have another person in the backfield, I'm defending with 2 players on 30% of the pitch. That is an extremely hard thing to do. And you can identify that 3 phases before it actually happens. and you're sitting there as a wing, you're like, get over here now, because they're on the other side and you've got 3 guys in the backfield. You already know you're in a really tough position. So when you actually look at it, the spacing across the board is really interesting, and you can see if you've got one extra guy, tightening up your defensive line by 1 meter per person has a massive knock-on effect. Not even just 1 phase, 2 phase, it's 3 phases down the line, and good teams will identify that and be able to get through those seams.
So I'm kind of curious. So, like you said, as a winger, like, like if a certain teammate based on their position gets a yellow card, like you're kind of in trouble. It's like, what positions are you like the most concerned about? Like if you see them get a yellow card, to be like, okay, my job for the next 10 minutes is going to be a hell of a lot harder.
Yeah, that's a funny one.
I'm not saying like rip apart teammates that have gotten yellow cards or anything.
No, 100%. I'm thinking in my head, like, any forward position, I'm fine. Like this is only, I'm thinking of it like as a personal, like, I'm going to be in the shits if a center is out, or the worst one is a 15. So say, and they typically don't get carded. Usually it's like an aerial thing or like a high tackle. So if a 15 does, that completely changes my game, because I'm going to have to cover way more backfield. I can't be front line. I can't do those sorts of things. And then at that point, the wings have to play on either side, and you're having to shift and cover way more ground. And then they're also a driver on like short side plays. The 10 will take the open side, and the 15, the communication level now that a 15 brings, that's super tough for me. But like if I see a 7 get red carded, it doesn't affect me. Like the guys in the forward pack will say the complete opposite thing. They're like, we'd rather that guy, because now our scrum's down a man and we've got to push X amount harder. And so it's very positional based. But for me, like even having a 10 get carded, not an issue, because your 12 is usually in today's game skilled enough that they can step into that. And yeah, you're attacking with one less guy, but you have those things in place. But it's having, for me, a backfield player, even another wing, the other guy, then the 15 has to put more or less play that other side of the pitch, and then you're just covering so much more ground, and it puts so much more stress on you.
Well, you know what? We're going to end up wrapping up there, Jeff. We really appreciate you coming on. But one last question: if anybody goes to Jeff's Instagram, it's full of some of his escapades while he was sailing around the world, either post 2019 World Cup or when he took his break from rugby. So our last question to you, and Derek came up with it, is where are some of your favorite places to sail?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I did my sailing license in South Africa. I love South Africa as a country, and that was part of the reason why I chose to do it there. And spent 6 months doing it. And it was a hectic place to do it. They got crazy winds and the danger coast, and it's like a really cool place to do it. But that is one extreme as far as having an enjoyment and sailing. I think anywhere in the Mediterranean, like Greece and that sort of places, you get the nice winds and stuff, so you can sail, but you can also chill, and the watercolor is super nice. But actually, after the World Cup, took 10 of the boys to Thailand, and we did a trip with 10 of us on a 45-foot catamaran in Phuket, and it was an awesome trip. You can imagine after 5 months together in like the most high intensity environment that our level of sport can provide. It was a pretty fun time, and Thailand was a good place to sail as well. But I'd say if I would to pack up my bags and go, it'd probably be the Mediterranean, just because, well, it's pretty awesome there.
Yeah. So do you have like a bucket list location that you haven't sailed yet that you would like to someday, whether it's just in like say next off season, or maybe like when you're finished playing rugby at all?
Oh yeah, man, I've got multiple.
It's a long bucket list.
Oh yeah. I think like the appeal of sailing is you can go to places that people can't get to easily, right? So one of the places is like Seychelles. You've got 300 islands that no one lives on, and you can go anchor up and you have an entire island to yourself. You can't fly in there. There's only one way to get there, and you get to experience things in a completely different way. So those sorts of places are what really kind of intrigues me. You get there off the back of Mother Nature, and like going to places like Tahiti and Fiji and some of those islands where people through the rugby community, which is great, but they're also just super remote. Like you can't get there any other way. That's the appeal of it.
Well, once again, Jeff, we appreciate you coming on the show. We are really looking forward to seeing you play with the Gilgronis in that burnt orange. Now, Derek, if anybody wants to listen to more of our podcasts or follow us for more of our updates, where can they head to?
Oh wow, you usually make Stu do this, but I guess
I know I'm keeping you on your toes this week.
Yeah, he's still he's too angry. He would deliver it to us. But yeah, if you want to listen to any more of our Rouge Rugby podcast, so this would be episode 55 by now, so you can listen to all 54. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other major podcasting platform too. Make sure you leave us like a review. It helps other people find it if it's reviewed well. You can follow us across social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Everything is at Rouge Rugby. And if you feel like it, if your thoughts cannot fit in a tweet, you can email us to @LaRougeRugbyPodcast@gmail.com. So we appreciate you listening and the support, and follow along, because we'll have a lot more exciting stuff to happen as the season goes on, and we'll have some more awesome guests like Jeff. And Jeff, I'll give you the opportunity if you want to plug anything that you're doing lately. Feel free to let the people know where they can find your stuff at.
Yeah, 100%, guys. Honestly, it's been a really fun morning. I enjoyed it, and sometimes it's good just having a yarn and talking shop. Anytime, let me know. And really enjoyed it, and keep doing what you guys are doing. I think building the brand of rugby in Canada is huge, and people like you, it's important. And it's been an enjoyable morning.